Antes de venir como el justo juez, vengo como el Rey de misericordia. Antes de que llegue el día de la justicia, les será dado a los hombres este signo en el cielo. Se apagará toda luz en el cielo y habrá una gran oscuridad en toda la tierra. Entonces, en el cielo, aparecerá el signo de la cruz y de los orificios donde fueron clavadas las manos y los pies del Salvador. Saldrán grandes luces que durante algún tiempo iluminarán la tierra. Esto sucederá poco tiempo antes del último día. Mi llama de amor está quemando. Es tan grande que no la puedo mantener por más tiempo dentro de mí. Salta hacia ti con poder explosivo. Cuando se derrame, mi amor destruirá el odio satánico que contamina el mundo. El mayor número de almas serán liberadas. Nada como esto ha existido antes. Este es el milagro más grande que haré por todos.
Turned into an 8-mile trek because I couldn't help it. So and since I'm Irish, I don't have to worry that this might fade into a nice tan or anything. It'll I went out. I meant to go for a kind of brief walk on the beach yesterday, and it turned into an 8-mile trek because I couldn't help it. So and since I'm Irish, I don't have to worry that this might fade into a nice tan or anything. It'll just melanoma is all. So that's in my future. But speaking of melanoma, I've been having more senior moments recently. I had my talks mixed up a bit. I was thinking this morning it would be prophecy and what lies ahead, and this afternoon proclaiming the kingdom. So it's going to be a bit more prophecy and what lies ahead now. But really both of the talks are going to be about both. Prophecy and what lies ahead gives us our mission, which is proclaiming the kingdom. And I'm going to give the foundation for that this morning. And then this afternoon at 4, I will be diving into more details on that. All right. So the good news here, of course, the word gospel means good news. And today we have especially good news, greatest news you could possibly imagine, as Jesus tells Luisa, "My daughter, as Adam sinned, God made him the promise of the future Redeemer. Centuries passed, but the promise did not fail. And the generations had the great good of redemption. Now, as I came from heaven and formed the kingdom of redemption, before departing for heaven, I made another promise, more solemn, of the kingdom of my will." And this was in the Our Father. And so as to give it more value and obtain it more quickly, I made this formal promise in the solemnity of my prayer, praying the Father to let his kingdom come, which is the divine will on earth as it is in heaven. I placed my very self at the head of this prayer, knowing that such was his will, and that prayed by me, he, the Father that is, would deny me nothing. More so, since I prayed with his very will, and I asked for something which was wanted by my Father himself. And after I had formed this prayer before my celestial Father, certain that the kingdom of my divine will upon earth would be granted to me, I taught it to my apostles, that they might teach it to the whole world, so that one might be the cry of all, "Your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." A promise more sure and solemn I could not make. So all of history, as I've said many times, is defined by these two promises. In the fall of man, God delayed not a moment. He gave the promise of the future Redeemer, and the 4,000 years that followed consisted above all in the faithful remnant, knowing that he meant what he said. I'm sorry, this came down again. I forgot to tighten it. But now, the days we're living in, we have an even more solemn promise. The second promise that defines the remainder of history. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's the good news, that's a guarantee. But that good news makes the most sense, I wager, in the backdrop of the bad news. And that brings us to prophecy and what's coming in the days ahead. We're nearing the end of the liturgical year now as we come closer to the feast of Christ the King. And the readings are going to get more and more apocalyptic as we move ahead. Next Sunday, I think it is, our Lord asks that question that I hope resounds in the consciences of all of us. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? And he's coming soon. And one way we know he's coming soon, not the coming soon and not the end of time, but is coming in grace with the kingdom and what's coming. The way we know, one way we know that's coming soon is you look around earth and faith has all but died. Not only in the secular world, but even in the church. It seems that more and more have lost faith. So as these readings get apocalyptic, that should remind us to also look at what heaven has said to the many seers about what's coming upon earth. And you might wonder, why bother with this? Why bother with these prophecies, these apocalyptic prophecies? First of all, this is all about the kingdom, the good news, what's coming shortly after these chastisements. But also, it's worth considering that if you look in the gospel, when you in some circles, whenever you bring up any sort of prophecy, people will say, oh, well, we know not the day or the hour. And that's certainly true. We don't have exact timetables because so much depends upon our response. You know, if we had an exact timetable, that would tempt us to just sit back and wait, which is not our calling. But that's, if you look at the context of the gospel, when Jesus said that, he said, right at that same time, therefore watch. He didn't say, because you know not the day or the hour, relax and don't bother with it. It's the opposite. He said, because you know not the details of exactly when, watch. Watch and pray. Because by discerning these signs of the times, we receive instruction on our own calling. So his exhortation is the opposite. His exhortation in the gospel itself is the opposite, in fact, of what you'll often hear, that we just shouldn't bother with it. But why, more practically, should we bother with it? Because it inspires us to be more zealous. When you realize that the end of the present era is at hand, again, not the end of the world, but the end of the world as we know it, perhaps. When you realize that time is growing short, that inspires you to be more zealous, to use this window of opportunity that God has given us. You know, we saw society fall apart, as probably none of us remember, with the whole COVID ordeal. And then now we have this window of opportunity that I didn't know would even open up, and I don't think it's going to last long, where society is kind of still functioning. We have this window of opportunity to use it to proclaim the kingdom. Let's take a look at this is above all going to be about what Jesus is telling Luisa, but a few other messages are really good in leading us up to that. There's an apparition that too few people know of, the apparitions of Our Lady of Heed in Germany in the middle of the 20th century. And this is an approved apparition, extremely solidly trustworthy. Jesus told these seers, these children, "I will make myself known to the people. Every soul will recognize me as their God. I am coming. I am at the door. My love has planned this action before the creation of the world." And pause there for a moment. Every soul will recognize me as their God because he's coming. And I don't know about you, but that makes me think of the warning that every soul will recognize him. And we need to get ourselves ready for that day and the world ready for that day. The world lies in dense darkness, Jesus continues here. This generation would deserve to be wiped out, but I wish to show myself merciful. The angel of peace will not delay in coming down to earth. I want to heal and save. So chastisement, but above all triumph. That's what this is a preparation for. He says, may my faithful prepare themselves for great things. I am coming myself, and I will manifest my will, the divine will. He will manifest the divine will to the world. All those who have suffered in these last times are my martyrs. And they prepare the new harvest for the church. I am coming soon, very soon. The things that will come shall surpass by far what has happened. He says this right after World War II. He says what's coming in the future on earth will surpass by far all of that. The Mother of God, my mother, and the angels will take part in it. Hell by now believes itself certain of the victory, but I will take it away. The devil knows his time is short also. That's why he's scrambling today. He's unleashing all of his fury upon the world and the church. He knows his time is short, and he knows that God, Jesus Christ, is going to come and take his victory away. I am coming, Jesus says, and with me peace shall come. I will build my kingdom with a small number of elect. And that's what he's doing now in the relative few. It's thanks be to God, the number itself is growing and growing, but compared to the church at large, it's still a tiny, tiny remnant who knows about the divine will and is striving to form this kingdom in their souls and in those who they can reach. That's the formation of the kingdom that's going on right now in preparation for its universal reign. And then he says, this kingdom will come suddenly, sooner than what one thinks. And I love that because our mission is to do everything we can to prepare, and then it's going to come. Chastisements, yes, but the kingdom is going to come so suddenly that it will completely overwhelm all of us. Jesus tells Luisa in one passage that it'll come almost like magic. This isn't something that society has to arduously for centuries and centuries build itself up towards. It's going to come from heaven. God's going to give it to us. We just need to prepare the ground for that. I will make my light shine, Jesus says, which to some will be a blessing and to others darkness. And that's also how people will respond to the warning. It will be a great blessing for some, but most people will probably rebel against it. Humanity will recognize my love and my power. I will make known my justice and my mercy. My dear children, the hour is drawing near. Pray unceasingly, and you will not be confused. He says that because he knows confusion was about to hit the church as never before in history. And we are at the peak of that confusion right now. They will converge from every part of the world, my elect, and glorify me. I am coming. Blessed are those who are ready. Blessed are those who will listen to me. Those who will listen. So there's in a nutshell what's coming. Both the chastisement aspect of it and the triumph. And it's all about the kingdom, and it's all about the divine will. And that's why we're here, isn't it? To do our part to try and get this message out to the world. So why can we be so sure, also looking more at the signs of the times, that this is it? Well, because, as you all heard quoted many times and read many times, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And if we look at the world today, we can easily conclude that sin abounds as never before in history. So just a brief couple words here on why this is indeed the case. Because the scholars, the professional Catholics, the apologists, they love to say this is just another bump in the road. We've seen all this before. If you look at things that the church has gone through in the past, this is just like that, just another cycle. This is not just another cycle, what we're in now. This is apocalyptic. And if you look at the state of the world, you'll see that. Jesus told Luisa in the final entry of volume 15, "My daughter, the whole world is upside down. Everyone is awaiting changes, peace, new things. They themselves gather to discuss about it, and are surprised at not being able to conclude anything and come to any serious decisions. So true peace does not arise, and everything resolves into words, but no facts. And they hope that more conferences may serve to make serious decisions, but they wait in vain." So we've been having all these, the world, and you think about all the organizations and treaties and UN and League of Nations and everything they've been doing, striving after peace for all these years. It's had no success. And we now see probably the greatest war in history around the corner, because they do not know how to make peace. Because unless the Lord builds a house, as the Psalm says, they labor in vain who build it. Jesus laments to Luisa that they've removed him from everything, and therefore all of their works are without any merit, without any value. All of these purely worldly efforts at supposedly aimed at the good, they're not going to succeed. They're doomed to fail from the start, because they exclude God. And we're just wasting our time with endless dialogue with people who are godless, supposing that we can collaborate with them wholeheartedly on our mission, which they don't even share. So we need to focus, we need to keep our eyes on the prize here. That's what Jesus is also saying, I think we could say. In the meantime, in this waiting, the people are in fear. They are in fear. Some prepare themselves for new wars, some hope for new conquests, but with this, the peoples are impoverished, are stripped alive, and while they are waiting, tired of the sad present era, dark and bloody, which enwraps them, they wait and hope for a new era of peace and of light. The world is at exactly the same point as when I was about to come upon earth. And this quote from Jesus to Luisa, he's talking about these chastisements that had happened and more were coming. And he says this to her almost 100 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but that was at the beginning of this era of chastisement, which began, with the First World War pretty clearly, that we're now reaching the culmination of, the grand finale of, and the chastisement's coming. So this quote applies even more truly to today, that the world is exactly the same point as when I was about to come upon earth. All were awaiting a great event, a new era, as indeed occurred. The same now. Since the great event, the new era in which the will of God may be done on earth as it is in heaven is coming, everyone is awaiting this new era, tired of the present one, but without knowing what this new thing, this change is about, just as they did not know it when I came upon earth. This expectation is a sure sign that the hour is near. So they did not know it. They, meaning the people in general, did not know it right before he came upon earth. But there was a great expectation in general, just like there's a great expectation today. But only the relative few who know what Jesus is saying to the mystics, above all to Luisa, only those relative few have any idea what this thing that's coming is. Which is why we need to be the ones to get this message of hope and mercy and his will out there. So the circumstances of the world right now mirroring right before he came upon earth, we've never seen that before. Jesus tells Luisa that sin abounded right before he came upon earth. And if you look at just look at the Old Testament, you don't see much of the prophets, do you, in Genesis and the early books of the Bible. But then when you come closer and closer to the time of the coming of Christ, you see an explosion of prophecy. And there's much more than the Bible talks about. Of course, there's a huge explosion of prophecy among the faithful Israelites right before Jesus came. What does that remind you of in the last 100 years? Explosion of Marian apparitions and mysticism that blows away anything the church has ever seen before. In the last 100 years, especially since Fatima, just this inundation of messages. And Mary, Our Lady tells Luisa, if I recall correctly from the Blessed Virgin Mary in the Kingdom, that she says, if I need to, I'll go to every family, every religious community. She'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to share the same quote I always do later on that. She's going to do whatever it takes to form this kingdom, and we need to know that and trust it. But that's another huge way in which the times we're in now, it's never been seen before in the history of the Church. Of course, there's always been mystics and prophecies and apparitions, but nothing like the last 100 years, which we're now reaching again the culmination of. Describes the present times awaiting the imminent coming of Jesus. So we need to proclaim that. We need to simply tell people that he's coming. You don't need a degree, you don't need to be an apologist or a theologian. If you are willing to just tell people, he's coming, Jesus is coming, he meant exactly what he said in the Our Father. And after 2,000 years, the time for the fulfillment of that prayer has come. Is there anyone who can't say that? I mean, we can all say that. And that's all you need to do. I mean, yeah, more is good. Dive in and acquire as much knowledge as you can. But that seed, that simple seed sown in the heart of the soul, God can work a miracle of conversions in someone's heart by just you being willing to sow that seed in someone's heart. So, grace, of course, builds upon nature. God can just directly intervene and do whatever he wants, but he'd much prefer to work his miracles in hearts and in the whole world, of course, but in hearts for now, through the efforts of his faithful, of his remnant. He'd much prefer to do it that way. So if you're willing, he will work wonders through even meager efforts. All right. So the change that the world is about to see is like nothing it's ever seen before. Even the redemption itself didn't, bring about the worldwide change that this third fiat is going to bring. It would be a lot easier for Jesus to just snap his fingers and make a new planet with his will reigning on it than it would be for him to fix this one. But he's not going to do that because he loves us. He loves those whom he did make, and he is going to renovate this. There's a quote in the volume, something to the effect of that it's much harder to renovate a falling apart old building than to just build a brand new one. And I've renovated a number of buildings and built some as well, and I agree with Jesus on that. You got to rip out all the rotting beams, and it's a mess. But that's what he's going to do with the world, and that's why such chastisement is necessary. Yes, the kingdom will come suddenly once he's done his preparation and once we've done our part. But that is, and it must involve chastisement because of how rotting and dilapidated the world is as it stands now. It can only be compared to a building moments away from total collapse. He's not going to let it totally collapse, though. And this is something I've pondered, just thinking about, again, the signs of the times and how, above all, God wants us to get to salvation and sanctification. Jesus tells Luisa, I don't care about the buildings. Those can be rebuilt. He says to her, it wasn't everything destroyed in the flood. It was all rebuilt again. I care solely, only about souls. Their salvation, getting to heaven, and their sanctification, building up as much treasure in heaven as possible. If we look at the generations in the world today, though, we have the great generation, the World War II generation. They were still largely faithful. And then, no offense to any, my generation's a mess also, so no offense to anyone what I'm about to say. But the first really apostate generation, it was the baby boomers. They're the ones who kind of, by and large, wandered away from God. And then it's only gotten worse with each generation after that. What I would say, God is not going to let the baby boomers die. That generation die off before he intervenes as never before in history. He's going to save them. He's going to save them. So he knows what we need, and he's going to give it. No offense to any baby boomers here. I love baby boomers. You guys are great. I'm sure you all look like millennials, though, right? From what I can see, yeah. And, so we're getting to the point where almost no one can remember a society that was really centered in God. I mean, if you told someone at the beginning of the 20th century what today would look like, they wouldn't have believed you. They would not have believed you. And it's Jesus' word. Jesus tells Luisa that even in her day, the world deserved to be simply destroyed. Pope St. Pius X, in a papal encyclical, in 1903, he wrote of the disastrous state of human society today. I'm quoting directly here. He says, "For who can fail to see that society is at the present time more than in any past age?" In other words, more than ever before in history, suffering from a terrible and deep-rooted malady, which, developing every day and eating into its inmost being, is dragging it to destruction. You understand, venerable brethren, what this disease is: apostasy from God. The worst possible sin is apostasy. And he's saying that sin was rampant in society far more than ever before in history. So you can't, really as a Catholic, you can't say that this is just another bump in the road. Pope St. Pius X said in 1903 it was worse than ever before. And 1903 compared to today looks like a utopia. I mean, no, they never could have imagined the legality of things like of divorce, of abortion. Suicide was unheard of compared to today. Contraception didn't exist. Marriage, they couldn't have imagined the definition of that being twisted as it is today. There had never been world wars. There had never been communism. So to look at that and compare it to today, that tells us all we need to know about the fact that God must intervene soon. He will intervene soon. Worse than before